Martin Lawrence's breakdown on set was worse than we thought. What if I told you one of the greatest comedy legends in history nearly lost his mind in front of millions and Hollywood tried to hide the truth? Martin Lawrence wasn't just funny, he was unstoppable. Until sudden rage, paranoia, lawsuits, guns, and a near-death collapse exposed a terrifying reality behind the laughter. This isn't the story you saw on TV. This is the dark side they never wanted you to know. Before we dive into how Martin went from icon to ticking time bomb, hit like, subscribe to Legends of Black Excellence, and stay to the end because the final twist will change the way you see him forever. The rise of a comedy king. Martin Lawrence takes over TV. In the early 1990s, Martin Lawrence wasn't just funny, he was a cultural earthquake. His sitcom, Martin, which premiered on Fox in 1992, became an instant ratings monster, averaging 15 million viewers per episode, dominating Thursday nights and redefining black television. It wasn't just a show, it was the voice of a generation. Fans quoted his catchphrases in school hallways, barbershops, and family cookouts. Characters like Shanae Jerome and Otis became household legends. For the first time since The Cosby Show, a black-led sitcom stood at the center of mainstream pop culture, but unlike the polished family dynamic of Cosby, Martin brought raw street humor, authenticity, and swagger. That energy made Martin feel real, and audiences across America, black and non-black, connected with it on a massive scale. At the same time, his stand-up career was unstoppable. Every major arena he booked sold out within hours. Tours like You So Crazy were pulling in millions of dollars, and the 1994 film version of that tour became the first NC-17 rated stand-up movie released in theaters, yet it still earned over $10 million. No comedian blended physical comedy, sharp commentary, and wild improvisation like Martin. He had the confidence of Eddie Murphy, the edge of Richard Pryor, and the originality of a street poet. Fans didn't just laugh, they studied his timing, his energy, his explosive stage presence. He could walk on stage and control 20,000 people with a single facial expression. To the comedy world, he wasn't the next big thing. He was the big thing. Hollywood noticed. Movie studios flooded him with offers. He landed roles in films like House Party Boomerang and eventually co-starred with Will Smith in Bad Boys 1995, which grossed $141 million worldwide and cemented him as a legitimate movie star. Industry insiders called him the future of comedy. Networks chased him. Brands chased him. Agents fought over him. At just 29 years old, Martin Lawrence was one of the highest-paid comedians in America. He was everywhere. Magazine covers, late-night interviews, red carpets, billboards. When he walked into a room, executives stood up. When he pitched a project, studios said yes before hearing the details. There was no ceiling. He had become the face of 90s black entertainment. So when NBC called in 1994, inviting him to host Saturday Night Live, it felt like the victory lap of a king. SNL was the biggest comedy stage in the world, and hosting it meant you had officially made it into the mainstream elite. They rarely gave the mic to someone this raw, this unapologetic, this unpredictable. But Martin was bigger than fear. He was the kind of star who broke rules and still got applause. Fans tuned in expecting chaos, brilliance, and comedy history. The network expected high ratings and cultural buzz. No one knew it yet, but this moment, Martin Lawrence at the absolute peak of his fame, was also the moment everything would begin to crack. Because when you rise this high, every move becomes a risk. And one night on that SNL stage would change his life forever. SNL Scandal. The monologue that got him banned for life. When Martin Lawrence stepped onto the Saturday Night Live stage in February 1994, he was at the height of his power. This was the moment every comedian dreamed of, hosting one of the most iconic comedy shows in American history, broadcast live to millions. At first, the monologue started with charming banter jokes about his success and the usual playful energy that made audiences love him. But then, without warning, he pivoted. Martin launched into a graphic, highly explicit rant about women's hygiene that went far beyond edgy humor. He described intimate body functions in raw street language using phrases never heard before on network television. The studio laughter turned from roaring to nervous. Viewers at home froze, unsure whether to laugh, change the channel, or cover their children's ears. SNL had always pushed boundaries, but this was different. This was a direct collision with broadcast standards, live and unedited. Within minutes, NBC executives were in chaos. Inside the control room, panic spread as they realized they could not cut or censor the monologue in real time. Phone lines lit up with outraged viewers. Parents demanded someone be fired. The network's Standards and Practices department scrambled to prepare statements. Even during the show, producers were already drafting apologies. By the time the episode ended, over 200 formal complaints had been filed with the network and the FCC. That number would continue to rise in the following days. SNL had seen controversy before Eddie Murphy, Sam Kinison, Andrew Dice Clay. But what Martin did was considered far more explicit and far less defensible. It wasn't satire. It wasn't coded. It was raw, vulgar detail aimed directly at a national primetime audience. The backlash didn't stop with viewers. Major sponsors and advertisers immediately threatened to pull their commercials from NBC programming. This was the most serious consequence in television money talks louder than comedy. Companies behind multi-million-dollar ad deals demanded answers and warned they would walk away if the network didn't take action. NBC was cornered. They had to choose between standing by a rising star or protecting their brand reputation and revenue. Executives held emergency meetings through the night. Some argued Martin was just being authentic. Others said the monologue violated federal broadcast regulations. In the end, the financial risk was too great. NBC didn't just punish him, they made an example out of him. The decision was historic. NBC issued a permanent lifetime ban on Martin Lawrence from all NBC-owned platforms, not just SNL. That meant no interviews, no guest appearances, no sitcoms, no talk shows, nothing under the NBC Universal umbrella. A complete blacklisting. This level of punishment was almost unheard of in entertainment. He wasn't a criminal. He hadn't assaulted anyone. But in the eyes of the network, he committed the ultimate sin. He made them look irresponsible on live television. At first, Martin tried defending himself, saying he was simply telling the truth about real-life topics. But the damage was already done. The monologue didn't just spark controversy, it ignited a domino effect of doubt about his judgment. And while his sitcom continued to thrive on Fox, Hollywood would never look at him the same way again. The night that should have been his crowning achievement became the moment his empire began to crack. Hollywood begins to fear Martin's mind. After the SNL scandal, Martin Lawrence remained a top star, thanks to the strong support of the Fox network. Martin remained a staple on Thursday nights, drawing millions of viewers and generating huge advertising revenue. Fox knew his charisma was irreplaceable, so they continued to trust him and protect him in the media. They even increased promotion, making Martin the dominant face of the small screen. But even as ratings remained high, a subtle change was taking place. People in the industry were starting to take a closer look at him. The SNL incident was no longer just a blip. It was the first sign of something more dangerous. Was Martin Lawrence losing control? In Hollywood, reputations are built not just on success, but also on how you conduct yourself when the lights go down. Executives, producers, and agents began to discuss Martin in private, acknowledging his rare talent, but also questioning his ability to maintain consistency. They recalled his late arrivals, his sudden script changes, his unprovoked outbursts backstage. Some called it artistic zeal, but others saw danger. On paper, he was a superstar. Behind the scenes, he was a ticking time bomb. And that's when the seeds of doubt began to germinate in the minds of the industry's most powerful people. It became even more clear that Martin's behavior was becoming more unpredictable. He would appear extremely energetic, then suddenly become quiet and distant. He would appear cheerful and outgoing one moment, then explode in anger for no apparent reason a few minutes later. Those who worked closely with him felt like they were walking on eggshells every day. Hollywood understands that success can be incredibly stressful, but they also understand that erratic behavior can lead to crisis. Behind the laughter, many began to whisper, "What's wrong with Martin?" A leading man can be a genius, but if he becomes uncontrollable, he can make any project a financial risk. Fox tried to keep things quiet to protect the Martin brand, but the entertainment industry never sleeps. The news spread through hallway conversations, private parties, and silent warnings. Be careful when working with him. Hollywood executives began to note Martin Lawrence's name not just as a star, but as a case to watch. They didn't cut deals outright, but they began to impose stricter conditions, demand more scrutiny, and even prepare alternative plans if things got out of hand. From then on, Martin was no longer seen as invincible. He became dangerous talent. And once the seeds of doubt had been planted, all it took was one more incident, and everything would explode. Gun in the street. The Ventura Boulevard meltdown. One afternoon in May 1996, under the blazing sun of Los Angeles, people on Ventura Boulevard witnessed a scene no one could believe. Martin Lawrence, America's biggest TV star at the time, stood in the middle of moving traffic holding a .380, screaming that someone was trying to assassinate him. He waved his arms frantically, pointing at innocent cars as if they were filled with invisible enemies. Many drivers panicked and swerved to avoid the car. Some thought it was a movie scene, but the panic on Martin's face told everyone this was not part of the script. In a few short minutes, one of America's funniest characters became the image of collapse. 911 calls poured in. Police, firefighters, and ambulances swarmed the scene. When the security forces approached, Martin did not resist, but his eyes were panicked and hazy, as if lost between reality and hallucination. He kept saying, "They are hunting me. They want to kill me." These words made the police understand that this was not a normal crime, but a serious mental crisis. He was put on a stretcher and taken straight to the hospital instead of jail. His body showed no signs of trauma, but his mind had gone beyond its limits. What shocked people more was not the image of Martin with a gun, but the fact that a star who once made the whole country laugh was drowning in fear that no one could see. The media immediately jumped on the issue like a fire to gasoline. However, instead of talking about mental disorders or hallucinations, major newspapers unanimously used a familiar phrase, exhaustion and dehydration. The story was painted as an accident caused by overwork, a safety excuse that Hollywood always uses when it wants to protect a star's image. The scarier truth was buried. This was not the first time Martin had acted abnormally. It was the culmination of a series of warning signs. But instead of facing the problem, the entire industry chose to cover it up. A close colleague of Martin's later admitted, "It's like watching a car crash you can't stop." They saw him fall apart, but no one dared to speak out. After being admitted to the hospital, Martin did not return home, as the press reported. He was kept in a psychiatric facility for observation information that was never widely publicized at the time. Doctors determined that he was experiencing a severe psychotic episode, complete with paranoia and hallucinations. This was not a tired moment. This was a cry for help from an overworked mind. Hollywood knew it. Those close to him knew it. But instead of helping him stop and recover, they tried to get things back to normal as quickly as possible. After all, Martin was more than just a person. He was a money-making machine. And in the entertainment world, profits always come before mental health. Ventura Boulevard was more than a shock. It was a warning that the worst was yet to come. Chaos on set. The Martin Show turns toxic. Behind the lively laughter on screen, Martin's studio was a place of constant tension. At the peak of his career, Martin Lawrence began to change in unexpected ways. He was no longer the cheerful colleague he had been in the early seasons. Every day when entering the studio, no one knew which version of him they would encounter: humorous, silent, or suddenly angry. Cast and crew had to observe his facial expressions and voice to guess his mood before daring to approach him. Not only was Martin unpredictable, He also became sensitive to even the smallest comments. Harmless jokes could also cause him to explode violently. There was a time when he stopped filming mid-shoot because he felt a crew member was looking at him inappropriately. When stress levels rose, he would start yelling, smashing things, and even verbally abusing staff on set. Some crew members described it as feeling like they were working with a volcano about to erupt. The unsafe atmosphere put many on the defensive. Some scenes had to be halted indefinitely because Martin disappeared from set without warning. These tense moments never made it to the media, but those behind the scenes knew this was no mere difficult artist. It was a sign of deep instability. Martin's immense success left him almost uncontrollable. He had absolute power on set. Every decision had to go through him, and if anyone disobeyed, they could be fired immediately. Cast and crew felt like guests in their own workplace. A close friend of Martin's once said, "Show business got the best of him. The industry swallowed him up." The pressure of a tight filming schedule, audience expectations, and the burden of always having to shine gradually broke Martin's mind over time. However, instead of stopping to heal, he continued to fight alone, becoming more and more exhausted. Despite the high ratings, the smiles on screen no longer reflected the reality behind them. Many members of the crew began to quit out of fear, while others endured silently because they did not want to lose their jobs. Everyone knew something was terribly wrong, but no one dared to say it out loud. Martin was the soul of the show, but also the storm that shook everything. And when a star can no longer control himself, the whole world around him will collapse. Martin is not just a legendary sitcom. It is where everything begins to fall apart. Tisha Campbell's lawsuit. The truth behind the breakdown. When the tensions behind the scenes of Martin reached a boiling point, the person most affected was none other than Tisha Campbell Martin, her co-star and Gina in the eyes of millions of viewers. Initially, the two had great chemistry on screen, becoming an iconic couple of the 90s sitcom. But as Martin became more and more out of control, their relationship gradually turned from professional to full of fear. Tisha not only had to act out love scenes and hugs on camera, but also had to deal with off-script behavior that went beyond the norm. She described the work environment as mentally and physically unsafe. Threats, unwanted advances, and a pressurized atmosphere left her exhausted. The turning point came in 1997. After many unsuccessful attempts at negotiation and intervention from the director and producer, Tisha Campbell decided to leave the crew. The departure of a leading female star from a popular sitcom at its peak shocked the entire television industry. But it was even more shocking when she filed a lawsuit against Martin Lawrence and the production company for harassment, intimidation, and creating a toxic work environment. The lawsuit not only damaged Martin's reputation, but also forced the producers to face legal responsibility. The media pressure increased day by day, causing all eyes to be focused on the show's internal affairs. Tisha's absence threw the final season script into chaos. Martin was built on the relationship between Martin and Gina, so when her character suddenly disappeared, the writers had to find ways to avoid any shared scenes. They used separate filming techniques, stand-ins or extras to fill in the gaps. Viewers began to ask, why aren't Martin and Gina together anymore? But Fox kept absolutely silent. Many members of the crew shared that the atmosphere on set was like walking a tightrope. No one dared to say the wrong thing for fear of getting involved. The show continued to air, but its soul was gone. Ultimately, the lawsuit was settled privately in an out-of-court settlement. A key condition of the deal was that Tisha Campbell return to complete the final 2 episodes, ending the series on a high note. However, when the two stood before the camera for the last time, the awkwardness was evident. There was no warm gaze or natural chemistry. Everyone just wanted to get this journey over with as quickly as possible. In May 1997, Martin officially left, not because of falling ratings or a lack of ideas, but because the star had destroyed the house he had built. The Tisha Campbell lawsuit not only ended a legendary sitcom, but also marked the moment when Martin Lawrence lost more than just his reputation. He lost trust, respect, and his image in front of the world. Directing disaster. A thin line between genius and madness. After the resounding success of his sitcoms and stand-up, Martin Lawrence decided to take on a bigger challenge, becoming a film director. A thin line between love and hate. Six was not only a personal project, but also a declaration that he did not want to be limited to the role of a comedian. Martin starred, co-wrote the script, and was also in the director's chair, a burden that even veteran filmmakers are wary of. Crew describes himself as always being the first to arrive and the last to leave, checking every scene himself, editing every line of dialogue. Nothing was approved without his approval. His ambition to make the film a masterpiece made him throw himself into his work like a man out of control. The pressure was physical and mental. Shooting schedules stretched to 18 hours a day, with Martin only getting 4 hours of sleep before continuing. He had to act out heavy emotional scenes while also managing the entire crew, resolving internal conflicts, dealing with producers, and meeting budgets. Crew said Martin barely ate on time, living on coffee and adrenaline. At first, many admired his energy, but after a few weeks, they realized he was no longer in control of his work pace. He was burning himself out. The overloaded pace caused him to swing wildly from one high point to the next. Finally, his body and mind could not take it anymore. During the climax of a day of filming, Martin suddenly became violently angry on set, throwing things, screaming for no reason, causing panic among the crew. No one understood what had just happened. Relatives said he appeared with a blank look in his eyes, as if he no longer recognized anyone around him. It was not just stress, it was a complete breakdown. Filming had to be stopped. Doctors were called. Martin was taken to a medical facility for emergency treatment, not because of physical injuries, but because of mental exhaustion. Hollywood tried to hide the truth, calling it stress or fatigue, but everyone present knew he had hit rock bottom. Still, with millions of dollars invested in the film, the crew was forced to wait for him to recover before returning to finish the project. Martin picked himself up and finished the film like a worn-out warrior. A thin line between love and hate opened to modest returns, not enough to compensate for the emotional damage he had suffered. Behind that achievement was a deep rift in Martin's soul, a rift that continued to widen in the years that followed. For the first time, Hollywood saw clearly this was not just a tired star. This was a man at war with himself and losing every day. Arrest at the airport. Martin caught with a loaded gun. Just months after the Ventura Boulevard incident, Martin Lawrence shocked Hollywood with an unbelievable move. In March 1996, he arrived at Burbank Airport to fly to another city to prepare for a new project. It was just a short trip, but everything turned into a disaster when his luggage was scanned. TSA agents discovered a fully loaded .380 semi-automatic pistol in his carry-on bag. Carrying a weapon is dangerous, but carrying a loaded gun into the airport security area can lead to serious criminal prosecution. Martin was immediately asked to stand aside and was questioned on the spot. The situation became even more confusing when he gave the excuse, "I forgot the gun was in my pocket." To the public, this explanation sounded absurd. How could someone forget that they were carrying a dangerous weapon when they went to the airport? However, to those who worked with Martin at the time, this statement was more than just an excuse. It accurately reflected his state of mind: distracted, panicked, and confused. He could no longer distinguish between what was normal and what was a serious violation. Airport police immediately arrested him. The news spread quickly, the press jumped on it, and once again Martin was on the front page, not because of his success, but because of his legal troubles. For an action that could have landed someone else in jail, Martin was fined, placed on probation, and ordered to undergo counseling. Partly because he was a celebrity, partly because his legal team quickly negotiated a downplayed case. But in the eyes of the industry, this was more dangerous than any previous scandal. This was no longer a matter of saying something bad or losing his temper. It was a clear sign of someone whose behavior was out of control. When an actor takes a gun to an airport without even realizing what he was doing, Hollywood begins to ask, can we still trust him on set? The Burbank incident wasn't discussed as much as SNL or Ventura Boulevard, but for producers it was the biggest wake-up call yet. SNL is forgivable, one industry source said. A romance scandal can be fixed. A gun scandal makes you a legal risk. The incident cemented Martin's image as an unstable star, causing insurers to hesitate to sign on. And more importantly, it highlighted an undeniable truth: Martin Lawrence was slipping between reality and chaos. And no one knew what would happen next. Near death at 107 degrees. The heat stroke that changed everything. Entering 1999, Martin Lawrence seemed to have overcome his previous scandals and was preparing to make a strong comeback with the lead role in Big Mama's House. To play a role that required high physical strength and action scenes in heavy makeup, he was determined to train harshly to stay in shape. One morning in the middle of summer in Los Angeles, the outside temperature reached 100 degrees, about 38 degrees. But Martin still wore a sauna suit, a specialized type of clothing that makes the body sweat many times more, and jogged long distances under the hot sun. No one accompanied him, no trainer supervised him. He threw himself into the exercise with the mentality of, try a little bit more. But this time his body could not bear the extreme. He collapsed on the road unconscious in silence in the scorching heat. A passerby discovered him and immediately called an ambulance. When paramedics arrived, they were horrified to find Martin's body burning, his pulse unstable, and his breathing weak. His body temperature was measured at 107 degrees to 41.6 degrees. A dangerous level that can lead to brain damage, multiple organ failure, and death within minutes. Paramedics had to cool him down on the scene with ice water and other emergency measures before taking him to the hospital. When they arrived at the emergency room, Martin was in a coma, unable to breathe on his own. Doctors were forced to put him on a ventilator to sustain his life. His family was immediately informed that his condition was extremely serious, to prepare for the worst. In the recovery room, doctors fought every second to save his brain and organs. At 107 degrees, every minute could mean permanent damage. His family waited outside, praying desperately. The news reached Hollywood, and for the first time, the worry was no longer, will he ruin his career, but will he survive? Many of his colleagues were shocked. They had seen him face pressure, had heard rumors of mental health problems, but never imagined he would die of exhaustion in the middle of his prime. A star who once made the world laugh now lay silent, fighting death. Fortunately, Martin woke up after a few days in a coma. He survived, but not quite the same. Some close friends said that after the incident, he became slower, less energetic, and mentally less sharp. Doctors warned that his body had suffered permanent damage. This event marked a major turning point. Hollywood no longer saw him as just an unstable star, but as a fragile human being who was destroying himself. And from that moment on, a question haunted everyone in the industry: if no one intervened, how much longer could Martin Lawrence live? Bad Boys 4. Premiere. Scare, is Martin Lawrence okay? In June 2024, after nearly 3 decades of being associated with the Bad Boys franchise, Martin Lawrence stepped onto the red carpet with Will Smith to promote the new film Bad Boys Ride or Die. This was supposed to be a glorious return for the classic action-comedy duo. Flashes flashed continuously, fans cheered, and the media jostled to capture the historic moment. But within minutes, the excitement turned to confusion. People realized that Martin was unsteady on his feet, walking slowly, even having to lean on Will Smith to keep his balance. Will tried to cover up, pretending that it was just an intimate moment between two friends, but the camera recorded everything. The expressions, the movements, the eyes, everything was strange. Within hours, the video had gone viral on social media. Millions of people watched the clip of Martin leaning, staggering, and clutching Will's shoulder as if he was losing control of his body. Fans began asking questions. Did Martin have a stroke? Is he having a relapse? Is this a sign of a new breakdown? Entertainment news sites were constantly exploiting the incident. They analyzed each frame, comparing his current gait with previous appearances. Some medical experts online even hypothesized that it was due to the nervous system, the aftermath of his 1999 heat stroke, or the side effects of medication. Concerns were widespread because fans still remembered Martin's turbulent past. Under pressure from the public, Martin Lawrence's PR team had to step in immediately. They arranged a quick interview for him to speak up. Martin laughed, joked, and even teased the rumors. "Does this look like someone who had a stroke I'm stroking?" He insisted that he was perfectly healthy, just a little dizzy from the crowd and the high temperature. The explanation sounded gentle, but not everyone was convinced. Because nervous on the red carpet did not explain the obvious instability in the way he moved. Some fans accepted the answer, but many others still suspected that the PR team was trying to put out the fire rather than tell the truth. Even though the film was a box office success and Martin completed his promotional tour without incident, the red carpet moment left a mark on the public. Because for Martin Lawrence, any sign of strangeness is a reminder of his tumultuous history. Breakdowns, hallucinations, hospitalizations, comas. The public no longer sees him as an actor aging normally. They see him as someone who has repeatedly fought his own battles. The moment he leaned on Will Smith was more than just a shoulder to lean on among friends. It was symbolic of the unanswered question, is Martin Lawrence really okay? Or is he just trying to stand up one more time before collapsing? Legacy of survival. The man who outlived his own demons. Martin Lawrence was once considered the rare comedic genius of his generation. He not only created an iconic sitcom, but also changed the way audiences viewed black humor on television. His explosive energy, streetwise wit, diverse characters, and ability to turn on a dime made him a cultural phenomenon. But that same bright fire also burned him from within. Unseen pressures and unheard mental traumas gradually pushed him to the brink. He went from making the nation laugh to making Hollywood silent with concern. Martin's career didn't decline because of a loss of talent. It was because he began to fight with his own mind. What sets Martin Lawrence apart from countless stars who have fallen, though, is not that he stumbles, but that he keeps getting back up. He was banned from NBC but still kept his hottest show on Fox. He was sued for toxic environments but still finished his series. He was arrested for carrying a gun but still made movies. He nearly died of heat stroke but still came back for Big Mama's House, a movie that grossed over $100 million. Every time Hollywood thought he was done, he reappeared on screen with his familiar smile. It was no longer the explosiveness of a young star, but the tenacity of a survivor. In the public eye, Martin is no longer the comedy ruler he was in the 90s. He doesn't chase fame like before, doesn't try to prove himself with new shows or huge tours. He chooses to slow down, focus on family health and the projects he truly loves. Many people think he's past his prime, but the truth is the opposite. He's learned a lesson that many stars never understand. Living is more important than being famous. And it's that maturity that makes him more respected by Hollywood than ever. Ultimately, Martin Lawrence's legacy isn't about laughs alone. It's about blood, tears, mistakes, and resurrection. He destroyed everything he built, but he also picked up the pieces and kept going. He didn't just survive the spotlight, he survived himself. And that's the greatest thing an artist can do to overcome fame, to overcome notoriety, and come out with the stark truth that survival is the greatest victory. Martin Lawrence's story is not just about fame, it's about survival. He conquered television, stand-up, and film, yet nearly lost everything to mental collapse lawsuits, addiction to pressure, and a body pushed to the edge of death. Hollywood tried to bury him, the media doubted him, and even he became his own greatest enemy. But somehow he's still here, older, wiser, and living proof that resilience can outshine talent. His legacy isn't just laughter, it's endurance. So now the question is, should we remember Martin as a troubled star who fell apart, or as a warrior who defeated his own demons?